Good day to all the listeners of this channel. My name is Lily, and I want to share a story from my childhood, an experience that has stayed with me ever since. I was in the 6th grade when it happened. It was summer break, and my 2 siblings and I decided to visit our grandparents in the province. It had been years since our last visit, and we were eager to return to the rural village where my father grew up. The place was quiet, surrounded by lush greenery, and had a sense of nostalgia that made us feel both excited and comforted. One particularly hot afternoon, my cousin suggested that we go for a swim in the river nearby. I was thrilled by the idea. It had been so long since I last swam in a river, and the thought of cool, clear water was tempting. However, when we asked our grandmother for permission, she immediately refused. "That river is dangerous," she said firmly. "No one from the village goes there anymore." We were disappointed but didn't argue. The next day, fortune seemed to favor us. Our grandparents had to leave the house for some errands, leaving us on our own. We saw it as our chance. Without hesitation, we grabbed our towels and ran towards the river. The place was breathtaking. The water was crystal clear, reflecting the sunlight like scattered diamonds. It was inviting, almost calling us in. My 2 cousins and my younger sibling eagerly jumped from a large rock into the water, laughing as they splashed around. I hesitated. There was an odd feeling in my chest, an unexplained sense of dread. But not wanting to be left behind, I forced myself to jump in. For a while, everything was fine. We played, splashed each other, and raced to the other side of the river. But then, something changed. As I swam, I felt something grab my ankle. It wasn't the usual feeling of stepping on a submerged branch or brushing against a fish. No, these felt like hands, cold, firm, and unrelenting. My heart pounded as I struggled to free myself, but the grip tightened, pulling me downward. I screamed for my sibling and cousins, my voice filled with terror. They turned towards me, their faces shifting from joy to horror. I was sinking. The world around me darkened as I was dragged deeper beneath the surface. And then I saw her, a woman. Her long dark hair floated around her like shadows, her pale face expressionless, her hollow eyes staring straight into mine. I wanted to scream, but the water filled my lungs, choking me. Just as I felt myself slipping away, I felt a force pulling me back up. Someone or something grabbed my shirt and yanked me towards the surface. I gasped for air as my sibling and cousins dragged me to the shore. My body trembled, my heart racing uncontrollably. When we returned home, our grandmother was furious. But as I recounted what had happened, her expression changed. She sighed deeply and shook her head. "That river is cursed," she murmured. "A long time ago, a young woman drowned there. Since then, her spirit has haunted the waters, pulling unsuspecting swimmers beneath the surface." I shuddered. The thought of nearly becoming another victim of the vengeful spirit made me sick to my stomach. I vowed never to return to that river again, but that was only the beginning of our terrifying summer. A few days later, my younger sibling had a chilling experience of their own. Our grandparents' house had a large mound in the backyard, a bunso, which according to local beliefs was the dwelling place of unseen beings. Our grandfather had warned us many times to stay away from it, but my sibling, being playful and stubborn, ignored the warnings. Every afternoon, they would run around the mound, treating it as part of their game. One evening, just past midnight, I woke up to find my sibling shaking violently. Their body was burning with fever, their face drenched in sweat. At that moment, I heard something else. A soft, eerie whistling sound coming from the backyard. My skin prickled with fear. Minutes later, my sibling clutched their stomach, wincing in pain. They cried, their voice filled with agony. Panicked, I called for our grandmother, who rushed in immediately. As I told her about my sibling playing near the mound, her face darkened. "Diosco," she whispered, "I warned you. That is not just any mound. It is a home for the unseen. And they are angry." Our grandmother wasted no time. She prepared offerings and whispered prayers into the night. We watched as she lit candles and muttered words we didn't understand. Slowly, my siblings' fever began to subside, but their body remained weak for days. From that night on, we followed every warning given to us. We avoided the river, stayed away from the mound, and respected the unspoken rules of the village. The summer we thought would be filled with fun turned into a lesson. A lesson about the unseen, about respecting things beyond our understanding, and about the thin line between the living and the dead. And even now, years later, I still remember that haunting face beneath the water and the whispers of the unseen in the dead of night. Grandmother's voice was filled with irritation and anger, her words sharp as she addressed my brother. I couldn't understand everything she was saying, but the weight of her frustration was clear. Grandfather entered the room carrying a small basin of water and a white candle. He placed them at the foot of my brother's bed. Without hesitation, grandmother lit the candle and let the wax drip into the water. The shapes that formed in the basin made her expression darken. "The Nuno got angry," she whispered, her voice low and grave. "That's why you heard whistling last night. It was their warning, and when he didn't listen, they punished him." Tears welled up in my eyes as I watched my brother shivering, clutching his stomach in pain. I felt powerless, wiping the sweat from his forehead, wishing I could do more. I wanted to call our parents, but grandmother shook her head. "No, don't. It will only make them worry." By morning, my brother's fever had slightly gone down, but his entire body was swollen. Grandmother led us to the backyard, where we made an offering, a small basket filled with rice, fruit, and a few coins. My brother, his voice weak but sincere, whispered an apology to the unseen beings he had angered. We left the offerings by the mound and walked away without looking back. That afternoon, my brother began to recover. The swelling receded and the pain in his stomach faded. "You must always listen," grandmother said firmly. "The spirits of this land have been here long before us. Disrespect them and they will make you pay." From that day on, we never ignored grandmother's warnings again. Some years later, I had another eerie experience. But this time, it wasn't in the province. It happened in my town when I was working on a short film project for school. My name is Joe, and at the time, I was 19 years old. We had decided to shoot our horror film at an old barangay hall that had been abandoned for years. Many locals had told stories about the place, about how it was haunted, how strange noises echoed from within at night, how some people who dared to enter never spoke of what they saw. I didn't pay much attention to the stories, at least not until I arrived at the barangay hall alone. It was around 2 p.m. The rest of my group hadn't arrived yet, so I decided to explore the area. The building was old, its walls cracked and overgrown with vines. The ground was littered with dry leaves and the air felt unnaturally still. As I walked around the back of the building, my eyes were drawn to a window. It was closed, but I had the strangest feeling that someone was watching me from the other side. A chill ran down my spine as I slowly approached, peering in. Just then, crash! Something shattered inside the building. I bolted, my heart hammering in my chest. By the time I reached my usual hangout spot, my friends had finally arrived. "Joe, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost," my friend Dino said, laughing. I forced a smile and shook my head, not wanting to admit what had just happened. We began filming shortly after, setting up our cameras inside the barangay hall. The setting was perfect for our horror theme. Dim light filtered through the broken windows, dust danced in the air, and every footstep echoed unnervingly through the empty space. As we reviewed our shots, we noticed something disturbing. In one of the clips, there was a closed door in the background. But just before the scene ended, the door moved, just a little, a barely noticeable creak, then a whisper-like laugh. We stared at each other, our faces pale. No one had been near that door. The next day, we returned to continue filming. One of my friends, Marvin, suddenly stopped and stared at the terrace above us, his face blank, his body trembling. "Marvin?" I nudged him, but he didn't react. Finally, he blinked and turned to me, his voice shaky. "I just saw someone standing up there." We all exchanged uneasy glances. The others laughed it off, saying he was just imagining things. But I remembered the stories, the rumors of a man who had died there years ago, whose spirit still roamed the hall. Marvin insisted we leave, but some of our friends wanted to stay. "If it's really haunted, let's prove it," one of them joked. We went back to filming, but my hands were shaking as I held the camera. Then, as I reviewed the footage, my blood ran cold. A shadow had passed in front of the camera. It wasn't one of us. Before we could react, the door slammed shut on its own. We panicked, rushing to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The air grew heavy, the temperature dropping as a suffocating presence filled the room. A chilling whisper echoed in my ear. Someone was here with us. I glanced at my watch, 5 p.m. The sun was setting, and soon we would be trapped in the dark with whatever lurked inside this place. In desperation, we broke a window and scrambled out, running as fast as we could. As we reached the road, I heard it again, the laugh, soft and mocking, coming from inside the hall. I never went back there again. But the nightmares stayed with me, and I was about to experience something even worse. The flickering lights in our house struggled to stay on as the name slowly formed before our eyes. The letters assembled themselves as if guided by an unseen force, spelling out something ominous. Then suddenly, darkness swallowed us whole. Panic erupted. We leapt from our seats, our breaths shallow, our hearts racing. The only sounds were the mingling echoes of terrified laughter and uncontrollable sobbing. And then, heavy footsteps. They weren't ours. We ran. Some bolted in different directions, their silhouettes vanishing into the night. I, along with 3 others, sprinted towards the road, desperate to escape whatever unseen terror lurked behind. The others? I had no idea where they had gone. When we finally reached the dimly lit street, I gasped for breath, my hands trembling as I relayed everything to my parents. That was when I learned the horrifying truth. Years ago, someone had taken their own life in that very place. Their body had been found hanging from the terrace of the old barangay hall. The thought sent a chill down my spine, and from that day on, I never set foot near that cursed building again. But that didn't mean the strange occurrences stopped. Whenever I passed by that place, an unshakable presence loomed over me, clinging to me like an unwanted shadow. It was as if something was always there, watching, waiting. One particularly stormy evening, as the rain hammered against the rooftops and the wind howled through the trees, I shared my experience on a local storytelling platform. I wasn't expecting anyone to believe me. In fact, even as I typed, I questioned my own sanity. But then, the responses started pouring in. Many dismissed it as paranoia. Some tried to rationalize it. And then there were those who whispered about the unseen, the beings that exist beyond our perception. Creatures that are neither fully of this world nor entirely absent from it. One response in particular stood out. A user who went by the name Maricar claimed to have had a similar experience, one that started when she was just 12 years old. She recounted how, night after night, a shadow followed her, always lingering just behind. At first she dismissed it, convincing herself it was a trick of the light, but it persisted. It loomed taller than her own shadow, moving in ways that defied logic. She told her grandmother, hoping for reassurance, but instead she was met with silence. Her grandmother's face darkened, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Ignore it," was all she said. But how could she? The shadow was relentless. One evening, as Maricar waited for a tricycle to take her home, she stepped closer to a store's light, hoping to prove to herself that it was all in her head. She turned to a vendor and asked, "Do you see anything behind me?" The old woman peered at her, puzzled. "Only your own shadow, dear." That was when the fear truly settled in. If no one else could see it, then what was it? She entered the tricycle, the driver's gaze flickering to her with unease. "Be careful how you sit," he muttered. "You nearly tipped the tricycle over." Confused, she protested, "I didn't sit down hard." When she handed over her fare and stepped out, the driver erupted in frustration. "Are you trying to break my tricycle? You shook it again." Maricar paled. She hadn't moved that forcefully. Later that night, as she lay in bed, an overwhelming presence invaded her room. A shadow loomed at her window, darker than the night itself. She screamed. Her grandmother rushed in, her face betraying no surprise, only resignation. "It's been following you for a long time," her grandmother admitted, and then came the revelation. one that shattered every shred of normalcy Maricar had clung to. The shadow wasn't a ghost, it wasn't a demon, it was her twin. Not a human twin, but an entity tied to her by something beyond comprehension. A being not of this world, but of another, a place where creatures like it dwelled. Her mother had fallen in love once, long ago, with someone, something that was never meant to be among mortals, and Maricar was the result of that union. Her twin was not here to harm her, it was here to protect her. It had been watching over her all her life, unseen, unnoticed, until the night it had to make its presence known. The night it saved her from something much worse. The tension in the air had thickened ever since Taya had muttered Lola's name. It was a name that should have long been forgotten, buried in the past along with its owner. Yet there it was, spoken with the innocence of a child who didn't know any better. Mama and I exchanged uneasy glances, our fears unspoken but understood. Could it be possible that Lola was haunting this house? That night, as the clock struck 10, I was still awake, deeply immersed in my studies for an upcoming exam. My room was dimly lit, and my eyes were growing heavy from exhaustion. Suddenly, from the corner of my eye, I caught a shadow moving past my doorway. I froze. My mind reasoned that it was probably Ate, my older sister, but my gut told me otherwise. A few moments later, I felt a whisper against my ear, soft, almost inaudible. I snapped my head to the side, but no one was there. Then I saw her. An old woman had stepped into the kitchen. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. At first I thought it might be a burglar, but as I cautiously followed her into the kitchen, she vanished into thin air. A gasp caught in my throat. The lights flickered before going out completely, plunging me into darkness. That was when I saw her again, standing at the foot of the stairs, her lifeless eyes locked onto mine. I bolted upstairs, my breath ragged, and threw the blanket over my head, as if that could protect me from whatever horror lurked in the shadows. Then something pulled at my blanket, a slow, deliberate tug. I clutched it tighter, my body rigid with fear. Footsteps, soft yet heavy, paced back and forth around my bed. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it all to be a dream. Strange occurrences continued in the house. One evening, Mama had left the gas stove on, but when I went to check, it was already turned off, as if unseen hands had done it. Another time, I heard something heavy fall upstairs, yet nothing was out of place. The eeriest moment came when I woke up in the middle of the night, my throat parched. As I sipped water in the dim glow of the moonlight, I saw a chair slowly scraping across the floor on its own. My body reacted before my mind could process it. I sprinted out of the kitchen, my heart hammering in my chest. I told Papa about everything, but he dismissed it with a scoff. "You're watching too many horror stories on your phone," he said, but I knew better. Then came the night my youngest sibling, just a toddler, began laughing and clapping her hands in the dark. She was playing with someone or something. Her tiny hands covered her face in a game of peekaboo, giggling in delight as if someone were there with her. My blood ran cold when she pointed to the empty space beside me and murmured a single word, "Lola." I wanted to believe it was just childish imagination, but in that moment something brushed against my hair, an unmistakable touch, a cold, feather-like caress. I snatched up my sister, but when I ran to the door, it wouldn't open. Panic surged through me. I banged on the door, screaming for Papa, and at last it burst open. I collapsed into his arms, sobbing. Later, my grandfather listened quietly as I recounted what had happened. His face grew grim. "It could be your Lola," he admitted. "Maybe she's just happy to see you. She never got to spend time with you when she was alive." A chill ran down my spine. I had always thought spirits only haunted places they were angry with. But what if some stayed behind simply because they missed the ones they left behind? The thought was unsettling yet oddly comforting. Still, fear lingered. Some nights I could swear I felt her watching me, standing just beyond my line of sight. And though time passed, I never fully grew used to her presence. It wasn't long before another unsettling event occurred in our small, isolated village. One that would prove that some spirits, unlike Lola, didn't return with love in their hearts. Not long after, new neighbors moved into the house down the road. At first they seemed like any ordinary family, but there was something off about them. Something that made my skin crawl every time I passed their home at night. As I continued to clean the yard, an eerie feeling crept over me, as if unseen eyes were watching from the vacant house next door. I glanced toward it and, to my horror, saw the shadowy figure of a woman staring directly at me. Her gaze sent a chill down my spine. I hurried inside, locking the door behind me, but my heart nearly stopped when I heard a knock. When I opened the door, the same woman stood there, now smiling. Despite my apprehension, I let her in, trying to mask my unease. "I'm Sable," she introduced herself. "I'm sorry if I scared you earlier. I just wanted to introduce myself, and I see you're expecting." Her eyes glimmered strangely as they focused on my stomach. "Yes, almost 5 months now," I replied cautiously. When my husband arrived, Sabel left in a hurry, almost as if she was afraid of being seen. That night, my husband warned me not to trust people too easily, especially new neighbors. As the days passed, I noticed something unsettling. Sabel's husband was never seen leaving the house. Instead, Sabel would often sit on their porch, staring at me with an intense, unreadable expression. Then came the night that changed everything. My husband was still out working, leaving me alone. As I lay in bed, I heard an unsettling noise from beneath the house. It was the unmistakable grunting of a pig. The sound made my hair stand on end, an inexplicable fear taking hold of me. Suddenly there was a loud thud at the door, followed by the creaking sound of someone or something trying to open it. The pig's grunting grew louder, almost desperate, and then silence. Moments later, I heard my husband's voice outside. Relieved, I rushed to open the door. But before I could, I caught sight of something moving in the yard. 2 massive black pigs with glowing red eyes. My breath hitched as I watched them pace near the fence, their presence oozing malice. My husband finally arrived, and upon seeing them, his face darkened. "There are stories about Aswans in this village," he whispered. "They target unborn children." He grabbed a broom and, to my shock, began striking the pigs. The the moment the broom hit them, an ear-piercing screech echoed into the night. The pigs resisted, but after several blows, they scurried off into the darkness. The next morning, Sabel came to our fence, offering food. But my attention was immediately drawn to her arms, which were covered in fresh scratches. She seemed uneasy, avoiding eye contact when I asked about them before making a hasty retreat. That same night, the pain in my stomach became unbearable. It felt as if something was clawing from within me. My husband rushed to fetch a healer, leaving me alone in agony. I could hear scratching sound above, on the roof, and beneath the house. Something was trying to get in. When my husband returned, he carried an elderly woman, a healer from the village. She examined me and confirmed our worst fear. "Something is trying to take your baby," she murmured gravely. "But it has been driven away for now. You must stay protected." After an excruciating labor, I finally gave birth to our child. Though safe, I would never forget that night, the night the darkness almost claimed my baby. To this day, I believe that Sabel was more than just a neighbor. I never saw her again after that night, but the fear she left behind still lingers in my memories, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurk in the shadows.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. Also make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new content. Let me know in the comments what you liked, what you didn't, and any constructive feedback you have. Love to hear from you. Your support and input help make future videos even better. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.